Tonight we are talking about strongholds from our past. We learn who we are. The essence of who we are comes from our experiences in our families of origin as well as our past experiences. And our family of origin is the family in which you were raised, not your current family that you live with, assuming that you do not currently live with your parents. And your family of origin can be your parents, it can be your grandparents, it can be whoever it is that raised you. And sometimes it's a foster family, sometimes it is several different families. We all have very different families of origin, but this is the family in which we learn how to live. We learn how to have our needs met, we learn who we are, and we learn how to deal with conflict as well. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the Bible story in Genesis chapter 27, which I believe most of you are familiar with, which is a story of Isaac. We have four main characters: Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau. Rebekah was the mother, and Esau, of course, was the older brother. His father said to him, "I want to bless you. I want you to go out, find an animal, kill it, make me some stew, and I will give you the blessing." Rebekah, who favored Jacob, said, "Oh, no, that's not going to happen. That's for my favorite son." So she went, made a meal, and said to Jacob, "You go in to your father, and you get the blessing that he thinks he's going to give to Esau." And Jacob said, "No, how could I do this sin against my father and against God?" Right? That's not what he said at all. He said, "But what's going to happen? I could get a curse instead of a blessing." And then he said, "My father might think I am trying to deceive him." He might think I'm trying to deceive him. If you go in and you put hair on because your brother's hairy to try and pretend that you're someone else, I think you're actually deceiving your father. But this is what we do. When we want something, we will take on another identity. And we have to know our own identity in order to fulfill our purpose. So just to start out, I want to talk about generational curse. This is something that we hear a lot about. And in Deuteronomy, there is a verse that says that God will visit. "I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." And it is common to hear that if there is a sin, that sin will be passed on to the son, to the grandson, and further. And I've heard ministers on TV actually preach this. There's another verse, also in Deuteronomy, that says, "Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin." We also know the story of the blind man. When he was blind, the disciples said, "Hold up, Jesus, why is he blind? Is it because of his sin, or is it because of his father's sin?" And Jesus said what? Neither. It's so that God can be glorified. So we do see, and the Bible is clear, that the curse of sin is not passed on from one to another. So what does all of this mean? It's a bent. It's an inclination. So if you have in your family an inclination or a bent to something, it tends to continue. When we look at Isaac, let's back up. Abraham, if you recall, was told to leave his family and go to a land unknown. He stopped off in Egypt. He was fearful for the king because he thought the king would look at his wife and think she was so beautiful that the king might hurt him in order for his wife to marry his wife. So he said, "Oh no, she's not my wife. She's my sister." Horrible man. I'm sorry, that you just lose your husbandship right there. So he says, no, I'm not her husband. She's my sister. She's my sister. So that gets resolved. You see, he does that twice. You look a few chapters later, Isaac, his son, is going off to Egypt. He sees a king. He has a beautiful wife. What does he do? The same thing. Oh, fear. My life? No, no, no. I know I have a promise from God that I'm going to have a whole generation, but hey, I can't risk it. So, no, she's my sister. He learned when there's a conflict, when there's fear, default to lying, default to deceit. And that's the same thing that Jacob was learning. I have a situation that I need resolved. I need to get a blessing. I'm going to do it deceitfully. I'm going to lie about this. And no parent sat down and said to their child, you know, it's okay to lie if you want to get something. That was not how it was done. But children learn. You can say what you want, but children learn from what we do and how we act. And this is the generational bent that we have. And in all of our lives, we have certain things. We learn things. And whether it's something as serious as lying or cheating or manipulating, or whether it's something much more simple. So I'm going to use our family as an example again. Growing up in my family, in my household with my mother, the whole concept was in the morning is the time to be productive. You get everything done out of the way, and then the afternoon is yours. You can play, you can go to your friends, whatever. But you have homework, you have cleaning, that's the morning. Whatever time you get up till noon, that's production time. And so, that's what you did. And when you were cleaning, so we'd get up in the morning and, Laura, you clean your room. So I'd be in there and I'm cleaning my room. You do upstairs, I do downstairs. So I'm upstairs and I clean my room, go in the bathroom. Where's my mom? Go downstairs, check if she's done the kitchen, because I got to finish first. So you're going back and forth and checking and getting all this stuff done. And then noon, okay, that's it. Everything's done. Let's call it quits. Have lunch. And then it's your time. And then I got married. You can imagine my shock when I got up and the television was on at 10 o'clock in the morning. Who turns the TV on at 10 o'clock in the morning? The TV isn't supposed to be on before noon. It doesn't make any sense. It's not right. How can that happen? And then I say, what are you doing? How about we clean the kitchen, clean this, let's clean, and then we can whatever. I'll do it later. What do you mean you do it later? How can you sit and relax knowing that you have something to do? How can you do that? I cannot fathom it. Right? That's what I learned. And then when we were talking about cleaning, the funny thing was, we said, okay, let's clean. So I'm upstairs and I'm in the room and I'm cleaning and putting this here, and then Alvin's right there. I said, why don't you go downstairs and start downstairs so we could all finish together? Oh, well, I can't talk to you when I'm downstairs. I don't need to talk to you, honey. I'm trying to clean the house right now so we can all sit together and be done this afternoon on our free time. In my mind, this is wrong. It's not the way to do something. But it isn't wrong. As someone said, it's different. Right? But these are the things that we learn. We learn who we are. We learn how to be. And they don't become different. They become it. And that is how one must act. And you want to force someone else to do your way. These are the generational things that we learn from our family. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 points from this. The first is knowing your identity. We need to know our identity. If you don't know who you are, you will take on another personality. You will go to find fake ID. And when you perhaps were younger, though I'm sure this happened to no one, in this room, you sometimes want to go somewhere and you will create a fake ID to get into places where you shouldn't be at that age, or probably any age. But it doesn't change who you are. It is, again, an attempt to deceive. That's all it is. You yourself don't change. You're trying to tell the person at the door, this is who I am. And this is the same thing that we do when we act or when we take on a personality that is not who God intended us to be. When I worked at a consulting firm, I learned how to be a consultant, etc. I would go out, and I was fairly new but fairly successful at it. I got a new boss, and she said, she was a little bit of a micromanager, and she said, I want to see how you work and how you interact with people, so I want to go out with everyone on their meetings. And we went out. She came out on one of my meetings, and a client that I was quite familiar with. And while we were out, the client asked a question. I answered it. We're going on. And she came in and she said, oh, how's your kids? Do you have children? Do you have this? And tell me about this, and tell me about your husband. And the client was kind of, yep, okay, yep, and explained this and explained that. And I'm not a particularly loud person. I'm there for an agenda. I will go through the agenda, but I don't really do all the fluff. And she was all about the fluff. And at the end of the meeting, she said to me, you accomplished the meeting, but you have a long way to go. You didn't talk to her about her children. You didn't talk to her about this. And, you are going to come to me with one of my meetings so that you can learn how it's done. Okay. So I went to her, with her to one of her clients, and we walked in the door, and she's just a big personality, and she said, hi, how are you? Mwah, mwah. Oh my goodness, it's been how long since I met you? I have this renewal for you, and we're going to do this, and oh, it's great. And I went up to the cottage last week, and she went on and on and on, and they had a fabulous meeting. And I left there, and for the next few meetings that I had to go to, I was stressed. I was like, I'm not doing what I'm meant to do. And I would talk to the client, and I would say, oh, I heard, did you go to the cottage? Did you whatever? And and I couldn't do it. So then I started writing a list of questions to ask, so that I wasn't always talking about the weather or the cottage before I went. And in reality, it was a flop. It did not work. It was not who I am. And some of my clients said, what's going on, really? And I came to realize we're two completely different people. And there are going to be clients who like her method and don't like mine. And there are going to be clients that love mine and don't like hers. And that's okay. I wasn't created to be the center of attention and to be a big room filler. I wasn't. And I need to be okay with that. And I am okay with that. Don't ever make me be the center of attention. It's just not my thing. But God made her the way she is too. And when we try to put it on, to be that fake ID, it's not even sustainable. When you think of Moses, God created Moses to be a speaker, to speak on his behalf, to lead the children of Israel. And when the bush was burning, and God said, I need you to go and lead the people and speak on my behalf, what did Moses say? I can't speak good. I don't have good language. And what did God say? Who made your mouth? When God asks his questions, it just shuts you right down. That's not what I created you for. Know what I created you for. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to find out who we are. And when we do, yes, let me just do this first. So I had a professor in university, a philosophy professor. And it really is such a shame that philosophy is given such a high standard in the secular world, because it's such a wonderful topic, and it can be so Christian when it's done properly. But I had a fabulous professor, and he asked us the question, who are you? So you'd say, I'm Laura. That's your name. Who are you? I'm a student. That's what you're doing right now. Who are you? I'm Canadian. That's where you're from. And every time you would answer something, there was a, but what does that mean? But this is whatever. And I spent a lot of time writing it out. I would write, I am female. I am whatever. Trying to figure out and spending time really on this assignment of who am I? And finally, I came to the conclusion at some point that I am a female who is forgiven by God and raised to glorify Him. Well, that changes everything. Because if I'm forgiven, then there's a certain way in which I'm going to act. Right? If you are married to someone and you cheat on that person, how are you going to react to that person if they say, I forgive you? If you have to say to your spouse, got something to tell you, and in the end they say, I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to rebuild this relationship with you. What's your relationship going to be like with that person? You're going to give it everything. And that's what God does. And that's why so many times in the Bible, his description and his relationship with us is that of husband and wife. Is that of do not commit adultery. Don't do that. When we do sin, we are basically committing adultery in that analogy. But it gives us purpose when we know our identity. And that is the next point. When we know our identity, it gives us purpose. I had a role to play. And my role was to ensure that others knew that same forgiveness. And others knew the goodness of God. I had a code of ethics that I had to keep up. But Joseph did not trust his ID from God. And that's why he decided he would need to manipulate. Sorry, not Joseph, Jacob. So the crazy part about it is when Jacob and Esau were in the womb, Rebekah said, this doesn't feel right. There's a war going on. She inquired of God, and God said, you have two nations in you. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So he already had his promise. He didn't need to manipulate anything. He didn't need to pretend he was anything. He had the promise. And yet he decided, I'm going to go around this, and I'm going to make this happen. And again, we think of that story, and we think, what a ridiculous thing to do. But isn't it what we do? God has said, I promise that I will open the windows of heaven for you when you return your tithe. And we say, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work it out this way, and I'm going to do my plan. God says, I will heal the brokenhearted. And we say, oh, I'm going to get some distractions, and I'm not going to deal with this at all. I'm going to avoid all of the situations in which I'm hurt, but I'm not going to go to God about it. I'm not going to take the time to admit and say, God, this crushed me. This totally broke me. And I need you to heal me so that I can be the person, the man or the woman that I need you, that you made me to be. When you look at Paul, and he was in jail, the earthquake came, the jail was, the chains were broken, and he could have left. He didn't. Why? Because he knew who he was, and he knew his purpose. His purpose was for the jailer and the jailer's family to know God. And at the end of that, when the jailer was just about to kill himself because he knew that the prisoners obviously would leave, and because they would leave, he would be punished. He was about to take his own life, and Paul said, "Stop, stop, we're here." And what did he say? "What must I do to be saved?" Are you kidding? Paul had a whole other purpose in being there and understanding why he was there and understanding just why he was on earth at all. The other thing is that when you know your identity, it gives you authority. It gives you authority to speak. Jesus was very clear on his assignment and why he was here. Satan in the wilderness tried to get Jesus to question his identity. How did he start every single temptation? If you are the Son of God, then you will. Jesus knew he was the Son of God. He didn't need to prove anything. He had the authority. He knew when he stood up and he said to those waves and to the wind, "Be still," they were going to listen. And by the way, do you realize that all creation obeys God? The sun rises as it should. The whale came to get Jonah. The waves stop. The wind stop. There's only one creation that doesn't listen. And we are the ones who have the best intellect. But we are also the only ones that need to be redeemed and can be redeemed. Lastly, of these points, it results in freedom. We don't have to worry where we are, if we're doing the right thing, if we're not doing the right thing. We don't have to worry. I remember worrying when I had 2 job offers at one point, and both were good, but I remember saying to someone, "I don't know where God wants me to go, and I'm supposed to be somewhere. I'm sure I'm supposed to be somewhere." And they said, "Why are you really worried about this? Do you think God's going to put you in the wrong spot? Let God work it out. He has the plan for you. You just need to inquire what his plan is for you." And I realized that, I was putting it on myself, making sure that I made the right decision of where to go. And it all worked out. Just before I signed, either one of them said, "Just wanted to let you know that we've had some changes here, and the person that you would be reporting to is not going to be here anymore." Well, that was the whole reason I was going there, so no issue there. That's right off the table. And he handled it. And that's what we need to do, is trust in that freedom. And in the same way, as a consultant, I had the freedom to treat my clients as I needed to. I didn't need to be like anybody else. God is the one who tells you who you are. No one else. In our families, we are often given labels. Sometimes we're told we're stupid. Sometimes we're told you are not enough. Sometimes you're told you're not good enough for me to stay. And then you compound that by other experiences that we have in our relationships. When someone says, "I don't forgive you for that." When someone says, "You're not worth my time." When someone says, "I'm going to leave you because you're not what I expected." All of those things we take on as our identity. So we say, "I am single. I am divorced. I am abused. I am rejected." All of these things we put on when God said, "I give you my robes of righteousness, and I make you my child. You are forgiven. You are loved with an everlasting love." There is nothing that you can do that's going to make God say, "Well, I didn't think you were going to do that." he's not going to do it. He is the one who said, I'm not going to leave you, no matter what. And in fact, you mean so much to me that I'm going to make sure that you would have to work harder to not be with me than to be with me. I'm going to send my son down to earth, and he's going to die so that I can spend eternity with you. That's how much God, values you. And I remember when I was younger, I didn't think, hear me out, I didn't think it might not have been such a big deal that God sent his son, from the perspective that he knew he was going to be raised. So if he knew he was going to be raised, okay, he's going to go, he's going to die, but he's going to be raised up, so really. But when you look at the whole process and the crucifixion and the agony and the pain that Jesus went through, that was traumatic. It wasn't something so simple as, I'm just going to go do that and be healed. And if I said to you, or if anyone said to me, I have the cure for Ebola, but I'm going to give you the injection, and just at the last minute, I'm going to give you that vaccine so that you'll still make it, would you go through it? No. But Jesus said, you are worth any pain that I might feel, so that you can be with me forever. He says, I'm going to give you my name. You get to call yourself Christian, which is a follower of Christ. Satan knows that if he can get us to question our identity, if he can get us to put on a label from someone else, that he will have us. He will be able to thwart our purpose, thwart our authority, and keep us in bondage. But we're not going to be in bondage. I was reading in Psalms where it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above, can't see, proclaims his handiwork. Have you ever gotten up either for the sunrise or sunset and you look? To me, the sunrise is just the most beautiful thing. When you see that black sky, and you can always tell where the sun's coming up. You don't, when we were on the ship, I would get up in the morning to see the sunrise. And you're on the ocean, just water everywhere. You can't tell what's north, south, east, west, but you can tell where the sun's going to rise. There's just little rays. And they get bigger and bigger. And then you know it's going to come. And as Hosea 6 says, as for as sure as you are that the sun will rise, God will be there. And you're just like, have you ever worried that the sun's not going to rise? Did any of you ever not fall asleep because you didn't know if the sun was coming up? That's what God is. As sure as you know that sun's going to rise every morning, because the heavens declare the glory of God. So the question is, what do you declare? You and I are the creation of God. So when we go into the office and someone looks at us, do we declare the glory of God to them? Even harder, what about our families? Do we declare the glory of God to our families? Remember that your enemy wants to keep you captive. And we have talked about him keeping you captive through fear, through your disposition, your natural personality, through, what else did we talk about? Pride. But remember, Satan cannot create. He doesn't have that. All he does is manipulate. So he takes what God has given you and changes it. God gave you a wonderful personality. I am a choleric. I'm that strong leadership personality that can't stand sitting back when there's stuff to be done. And that's a great personality, but Satan can change it. He can manipulate it so that I can see you sitting there and think, well, why are you so useless that you can't get it? That's not the purpose of my personality. But God made you as a phlegmatic, which will say, I'll do it tomorrow. So that you don't have my issues. So that we can work together. When God said, I made you a family, each of us has our own role to play. And if we're all one way, it's not going to work. Even though it is right not to, to get your work done in the morning. We all know that's right, right? Okay. So, in conclusion, just remember that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. God said, I formed you in the womb, and I appointed you. Do you know that a pregnancy test, the earliest it can detect is 6 to 8 days, and that's amazing. But God says, forget 6 to 8 days. Before you were formed, I knew you. I spent time, and I appointed you. I created you the way you are. My mother, the last story used to say, tell me the story of a wife who every night would say to her husband, did you lock the door? And he would say, yes. Sorry, other way around. He would say, did you lock the door? And she'd say, yes. And he would go to the door and check the door. And of course it was locked. Every night. And he used to drive her crazy. And she said, God, I don't know what's wrong with this man. He asked me a question, I answered the question, he has to go check. And God said to her, I made him that way. And of course she said, on purpose? Which he did. And each of us has a purpose. So don't allow Satan to manipulate God's purpose and intention. The only way we will find our identity is by spending time with God. Jacob spent time with the I am, the senses, the essence of identity. And God changed his name and said, you are no longer called deceiver, you are called Israel, which means God prevails. And Revelation tells us that when Jesus comes and when we go to heaven, we also get a new name. God wants to free you by holding your thoughts captive, so give them to him.